One aspect of the meal I want to talk about is that it says in the Gemara, Mechayev inish livisume beforaya. You're supposed to get shikar on Purim. Rashi says livisume lishtaker beyain, to get drunk with wine. That's what Rashi says. He also says they got drunk. There's a story in the Gemara. That's what it says. You're obligated to, and many connect this to the meal. So at the meal you're supposed to drink wine. And so there's a story that's brought in the Gemara. There were two Amoraim who did this, Rabba and Rabbi Zera, and they had a festive time. It says they got tipsy or they drank, and it turns out they got a little too excited. It says that Rabba rose up and he slaughtered Rabbi Zera at the meal. Okay, the commentators explain what that slaughtering means. It could mean that they just really got so plastered that they were totally out of it. However you understand it. It could be physically slaughtered him. So it says that it didn't end in a bad way. Rabbah ended up reviving him through his prayer. So the next year, Rabbah calls up Rabbi Zera and says, "Hey, you want to come back to my meal this year?" Rabbi Zera says, "Not so fast. Miracles," the Gemara says this, miracles don't happen every year. I'm afraid you might slaughter me again. You won't be able to revive me. So he didn't go back. Now, that's the story in the Gemara. It's very interesting why that story is there, right? So one of the commentators says that story is there to say that the Gemara is walking back its original statement. It originally said you're supposed to drink. No, it's very dangerous to drink. Therefore, we shouldn't drink on Purim. But overall, almost all the commentators accept that there is some sort of obligation or imperative to drink in some capacity. The simple explanation is that you're supposed to really get tipsy. Others, the Rambam says, which is brought in the Ramah, which is the Ashkenazic halacha, that you drink until you kind of fall asleep. When you fall asleep, then you don't have such great cognition, and then you've accomplished what the Gemara says. The Gemara says you're supposed to get to a point where you can't distinguish between the blessing of Mordechai and the curse of Haman. So if you understand it literally, it's a great level of inebriation to not be able to distinguish between the two. If you understand like the Rambam, it means you fell asleep and you couldn't distinguish between them. Others say it's just kind of like symbolic, like you're supposed to get a little bit tipsy, that like you can't fully grasp the difference between them. And others say, as we said, that it's not relevant at all because of that story. And so I want to offer one more thought on this. Maybe it's not only about amounts, how much, but maybe it's about a mindset. During the meal isn't just for celebrating. The meal is to really think about God's miracles. Think about all that Hashem did for Am Yisrael in the time of Esther and Mordechai. And really, you're supposed to think about this level of blessing of Mordechai and the curse of Haman, and trying to see that they're not so different. What do I mean by that? We're trying to see that within the curses, within the difficult times, within the scary moments, Hashem is still there. There still is a blessing within the curse, within the difficulties. And that is really the message of the Megillah. Hashem was with Am Yisrael all throughout that story. They were so scared. They were petrified. But Hashem already had a plan. Hashem put Esther in the palace even before Haman came up with his plan. Hashem was already preparing the remedy before the disaster. And Hashem had all these miracles that happened throughout the story. The king happened to not be able to sleep. Haman happened to be outside at that moment and then he came in, and then he gave the idea, what ended up happening to Mordechai. All these things were choreographed in a way from Hashem. And so the message perhaps is like, maybe we're supposed to drink. Why? That's supposed to encourage us to think on this deeper level. If we can get to that place, maybe we don't need the wine for that. But really that's the message in the Purim Suda. Is to get to that place where you could see, even in the curses, even the difficult times, Hashem's hand is still there. If you can get to that place, you've achieved, I think, what you're supposed to achieve in the Suda. In order to recite Rabbi's Kaddish, which can be found on page 57. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Meratzah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu,